Welcome to another episode of Backstage at BYU-Idaho.
Hi, I'm Janalee Meeker. I am an online instructor at BYU-Idaho. I'm also a teaching group leader of a family group. We all teach 400 level upper division family classes.
What does leadership have to do with being an online instructor?
When it comes to leadership in the online classroom, we really look to the Savior as our ultimate example. And leadership is really all about relationships. So something that I learned, again, back to my master's program and this book, and I'll share with you what it was because it's a great little book. It's called Extraordinary Leadership, and it's Thinking Systems, and it's by Roberta Gilbert. But she teaches about how high-level leaders operate. She mentioned something that was kind of life-changing for me, where she talks about how extraordinary leaders are relationship masters. And she listed some characteristics. We come to earth with certain gifts. I think of relationship masters kind of the same way. These are characteristics that we can strive for and work for. But let me just share a few that I've thought about and that I think apply well to what we do in online learning. Extraordinary leaders who are relationship masters work on managing the anxiety within the system because in leadership, we're dealing with relationships, and relationships can be challenging. One thing that Roberta Gilbert says in her book, let me just share this small portion. She says, by far, most of the difficulty leaders experience is in relationships. And then she talks about how when we learn to think systems and we apply it seriously to our lives, that we don't need books and we don't need a lot of extra help in becoming leaders, but that we naturally become leaders as we look at things with a different perspective. So part of being an extraordinary leader, working in an online classroom, looking at leadership through that systems lens, a lot of it is about building relationships. It's working one-on-one, just as the Savior did. It's managing that anxiety in the system, and that begins with managing yourself. So a couple of other characteristics of extraordinary leaders. They're guided by principle, and at BYU-Idaho, we have great principles at the foundation of what we do. We have the gospel first, and then we have the learning model. So we're always going back to that principle. It guides us in our decisions and the things that we do. They aim for relating to everyone as eyeball-to-eyeball equals. They recognize their own contribution to the systems. There isn't necessarily this hierarchy of I'm the teacher and I'm going to tell you how to do things, but they recognize that when something isn't going quite right, that they might have a part to play in that, or they might have a part to play in lifting and bringing the rest of their class to that higher standard. They're easy to talk to, and they have boundaries. They don't take on others' anxiety or spread theirs around the system. They have a way of bringing people close to them. They sit back, and they observe, and they ask insightful questions, and they ponder and think about things. They're curious. They refrain from pointing out deficiencies. I really appreciate that it's something that people that are really extraordinary leaders see the best in people. And then I had mentioned that they manage themselves. That it really does begin with that individual growing, learning how to manage themselves, and then pulling others in. They're a breath of fresh air in the whole organization. People are drawn to them because they are that positive and happy and easy to talk to.
I know you've already touched on this a little bit, but how exactly does the Lord play a role in your classroom?
When I started graduate school, I had just had my fifth baby, and my husband was a newly called bishop, and he was working on his dissertation, and yet I felt impressed to go to school, and I thought this must be crazy, but I knew that it was what the Lord wanted me to do. I knew there were a couple of things that I was committed to when I started school. One was that I knew that I was going to put the Lord first, and my family also right there with the Lord. That I couldn't push my children away and say, I'm busy at the computer right now. And so I made a commitment that I wouldn't do my schoolwork when my children were home and there with me, and that I was going to be responsive to them and their needs. I knew that it was going to be late nights and early mornings, and this still applies because as online instructors, we have to figure out how to fit that in. But I developed a habit of I would sit at my computer, and before I would open my laptop and start my schoolwork, I would say a prayer, and I would invite the Spirit to guide my thoughts and to help me be efficient in the work that I was going to do. And so that still applies today when I sit at my computer and I invite the Spirit to teach me and to help me see my students the way that He sees them.
We are so grateful for the inspired thoughts that were shared with us today, and we challenge you to post your takeaways in your teaching group or write a blog post in the community. Thank you for all that you do, instructors. Keep learning, keep uplifting.